Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the right time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on the ESPN app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Go ahead and do that. Rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give me 4 stars. I'm inclined to believe that you are a hater. September is here. We're back to doing 2 podcasts a week, back to doing the interviews. NFL season starts here on Thursday. And so to join us to talk about this, we got my man, Domonique Foxworth, who will remind you that if you laugh at him playing football, you are just a dot in the crowd.
I enjoyed that song because I normally listen to the podcast on 2 times speed, and the song's pretty whack when you speed it up.
Y'all turn it into a video game?
Speed, yeah, a regular speed. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot this song is actually pretty good.
Oh, dang, man. I tell you this, though, just because you the one tripping don't mean you got to say it was whack.
No, it's not. It was only whack when it's fast.
Yeah.
But when it plays normal speed, it sounds good.
Yeah, shout out to the homie Petey Green on the beat with that one. Now, dude, this has been an interesting 24, 48 hours as we get ready to do this. Let's start with Le'Veon Bell, as that's the thing that happened most recently. Have you ever heard of a situation where guys go so hard on a dude about a holdout?
Yeah. I was heartbroken when I read those things. Because the one thing that you expect is that if anyone will understand the plight of the player, it is other players. And I've come to accept that fans are going to turn against players who are holding out for money. I've come to accept that that owners and media and most people around will turn against them. But you hope to think that the guys who you have the best relationship with, your teammates who've seen how, you can easily make the argument that the Steelers have taken him for granted and mistreated Le'Veon Bell over the past few years. Those guys who are that close to it, for them to turn on him, it lends me to believe that there's other things going on in that relationship. Like they feel like they were lied to, or they're not as close as we would have presumed that they are. So I don't know. I was heartbroken to see particularly his offensive lineman kind of being annoyed with him.
Well, that was the thing that got me. It all seemed to be one position group.
Right.
And and Foster's the PA rep, right?
Yep.
And so when Foster said, we're the ones that made it happen for you, I was like, oh my goodness, this is bad.
It's also false. You guys are really good, but Le'Veon Bell is also really good and has been for a long time. I think that is, at the very least, it's a symbiotic relationship. Let's not pretend like James Conner's gonna go out there and put up Le'Veon Bell numbers because you guys are the ones who made it happen. Relax, pump your brakes. I'm sure he bought you guys some gifts after each 1,000-yard season. You guys get paid too. Let's not start acting like he's not valuable.
Now, you are a PA guy, right?
Yep.
What would you from the union standpoint? What do you think about that being the guy to say that?
Yeah, I think that we want to extrapolate out all these big overarching things about holdouts, or it's not we necessarily, but some people about holdouts and about how teams feel about their teammates doing this. And I think it's more of a personal thing. Anytime something like this gets out, it's personal. And I don't know what Le'Veon Bell's personal relationship is with those guys. And it seemed like they insinuated that they felt like they were misled or lied to. And I think that is probably what hurts them more than anything, is that they thought that, okay, Le'Veon, you do whatever you want with the team, but you got to be honest with us. And to me, it feels like they believe that whether it was insinuated or said directly, they believed that Le'Veon was going to show up. And we talked about this also, their livelihood is dependent on them playing well, and them playing well is dependent on having Le'Veon Bell behind them, and winning a championship and getting to their ultimate goal is all dependent on Le'Veon Bell. So when it starts to feel like somebody is toying with that, don't show up for camp. That's fine. But you got to show up for these regular seasons games. At least that's the perspective that I think that they're taking.
Well, see, I wonder if he told them he was coming, or they just assumed he was coming like everybody else.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, he has, not just like everyone else assumed it, but like he's been doing, because he's been doing this just about every offseason for the past few years. So they assume that he's going to show up and carry the ball or touch the ball 400 plus times again and go over 1,000 yards and be one of the league's best receivers on top of being one of the league's best running backs. And he ain't for that life, because every carry he takes lowers his value. And if you guys aren't going to pay him long term, he's like, no, I'm not doing that. If you look at the amount of money he's made throughout his career, the first 4 years of his career, he was grossly underpaid. And then he got one franchise tag, which put him at about what he should be getting for the year, but he didn't get any long-term security. And you see a guy like Gurley, I'm sure that really hurt Le'Veon Bell, because Gurley did what Le'Veon did for 2 years. He's been in the league for 3 years. 1 year was really bad. He had 2 good years. And then they gave him a monster deal. I can't imagine being Le'Veon Bell and seeing someone who's trying to be like you get paid much better than you're getting paid.
Well, the thing also, though, is that Gurley got this money, I think, at 24 is when they decide to pay him. And they'll pay you at 24. Like, paying a running back at 27 or 28 is such a dicey proposition. And so, like, I remember when DeMarco Murray was a free agent and wound up going to Tennessee, where I always felt like Jerry got the yards. That's what he paid for. The Titans paid for those carries. Like, all those carries that Murray took, the Titans ultimately wound up paying for them, and the Steelers don't want to pay for the carries.
Yeah, I don't know when Le'Veon Bell's birthday is, but I guess 24 and 26 sound like they're close. But to your point, they're not that close because Bell has over 1,200 carries, over 300 receptions in his career. Gurley has about 800 carries and about 120 receptions in his career. Like, that's a huge difference. That's a lot of mileage on one person's body. And I mean, I could understand. The bad part is, from a business perspective, I can understand what the Steelers are doing because that position is one that is fragile, I guess is the best way to put it. And not that the player's fragile, but that's a position that you take a lot of hits, you can get wear and tear, you could get a freak injury here or there. And what they did was they had him under the 4-year, I think he was a 2nd round pick contract, and then they put him on a 1-year deal. So they just essentially tied him up for 6 years is what they were trying to do without having any commitment to a position that is that dangerous. So I understand the business behind it, but there are people involved. They are not cogs. And when you are disrespectful is how he's taking it, and you don't compensate someone who sacrificed for you, because he was underpaid for 4 years. Everyone's acting like now all of a sudden he's getting paid right, so he should show up. I agree. $12 million, $14 million, that's about what a player like him should be getting paid. But what about all those other years, those 4 years where they were stealing from him? Like, he wants that back too.
Well, are you surprised that people ain't brought the weed up? Because if I were going to make the argument as to why we're not going to give him a long-term deal, this dude keeps getting popped for smoking weed.
Yeah, that's a bad move. I'm not surprised that people haven't brought it up because you don't need to, because I just laid out the case right there for why it's smart professionally. Like, they don't need to get into all these other, or no one really needs to get into these areas of, I was going to say character smearing, but it's not really necessarily character smearing as much as it's just pointing out that is part of the risk. There is risk to signing a running back long term, and there's risk to signing someone who can't manage to dodge the very easy to dodge weed test.
Now, how does this go if you're Mike Tomlin, right? Because I've been talking about this book I've been reading called Brand NFL, which I believe that you have read. And one of the things that I found interesting about that book was, back when you had these strikes that people were breaking, you had cats crossing the picket lines, coaches were telling their players, don't dog out your boys, right? Like, even in that circumstance, coaches are telling them, no, you stand with your fellow teammate. So what's Mike Tomlin do when he gets in with these cats?
Yeah, I think that it seems like, my assumption is that this is something that they all feel comfortable saying together. Like, football teams very rarely speak out of line. And if there was a team that is going to do that, I guess maybe the Steelers are one of the teams that you would assume would do that, considering the background of guys live streaming from the locker room and things like that. But I assume that Mike Tomlin is okay with this, because the type of things that they're saying is blatant coach speak. Like, well, we just deal with the guys that were in the room. If you're not here, then we don't need you. Like, that's the stuff that you hear all the time when somebody's injured or when you trade somebody or you release somebody. Like, it's just coach speak. I assume that Mike Tomlin is on board with that, but I hate it, because you're right. That's the reason why a lot of coaches, even though they wanted players back, many coaches would tell them to stick with those guys, because they understand that these are not cogs, that these are relationships, and the relationships matter.
Now, this is the blessing and curse of franchise tag, right? Which I think that most in football call a curse, but it got me thinking about Kirk Cousins, right? Like, Kirk Cousins made all this money he's getting because of the franchise tag, but he's playing a position that's built. Basically, they've set the rules up to try to make it possible that a good quarterback can play 20 years. Right. Oh, yeah. And so a guy like that can keep going back to the franchise tag, where Cousins is like, well, I just like to do more 1-year deals. And you hear people say, well, more players should bet on themselves. But betting on yourself is also betting against football and just what football happens to be. And a running back doesn't really have that option. And I feel like they, more than anybody else, get jobbed by the franchise tag, because their average top 5 money just isn't the same as it is for these other positions.
Yeah, it's because their careers are shorter. And I think that's something that you should be, particularly top running backs that are first round picks, because not only are you tied up for 4 years, you might get the 5th year option, and then you could get 2 franchise years. And it's not, if that all works out for you and you play through your first round deal, you get a 5th year option, which is good money. You get franchise 2 years, and then you become a free agent. That's fine. But like you said, you're betting against football. It's not going to happen like that. There's going to come a time where something happens that lowers your value, and you're not going to get out of it what you put in necessarily. And for Kirk Cousins, another thing that I think is important is he signed his 3-year deal. He's going to be in his early to mid 30s, assuming he plays well, a free agent quarterback again. He is a mercenary. He is the modern day Darrelle Revis. He's going to clean up, and I doubt that he stays in Minnesota. He's going to go somewhere else and get another check. So good for him.
Yeah, because I got a feeling Minnesota, after this is done, ain't going to want to keep giving him that money. How about that part? Want to talk about that?
That's for sure. But he's just good enough that somebody else is going to be like, this is all we need to get us over the edge. So that's all he has to do. He's got to be good enough.
And I ain't even mad at him, right? Like, he should go ahead and get his money. And I give him credit for this. He got good sense. The Jets offered him 90. The Vikings offered him 84. He was like, I ain't going to the Jets.
It was genius, because I would pay $6 million to have a better team around me, because his numbers will be better with good receivers, a great defense. He mess around, come out after 3 years, and people think that he's like a real legit well, he's a franchise quarterback, but he could find himself in a Pro Bowl or 2 after playing up there.
Well, let me ask you this. What does franchise quarterback mean? Right? Yeah. Because I think he is a starting quarterback. And I feel like we make anybody that's a starter into a franchise quarterback. Yeah. And I guess it has to be because there's so few capable starting quarterbacks.
Yeah, you're probably right. I'm probably using that term a little too loosely, but he's definitely 100% a starting NFL quarterback. Yes. Can you win a Super Bowl with him? Yes, with the right things around him. Yeah. Is he Peyton Manning, where you drop him on the team, or Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, and your team is good no matter what else is around him? Absolutely not. But there are 2 or 3 guys like that in the league. So I don't know where you draw the line for franchise quarterback. I think that Kirk Cousins is just below it, but is he a quarterback that you can build a franchise around? Yes.
I gotta say, man, Nick Foles kind of sort of should have either made everybody money or cost everybody money, because my can you win a Super Bowl with him question has been obliterated by that.
I think what's happening is, I've complained about it for a long time, is how dumb and lazy I think NFL coaches have been. That's changing. Like, with this new guard of coaches, it appears to me that they are doing something that they should have done a long time ago, whereas they build systems that accentuate the skills of the players they have. What we've grown accustomed to, and I think part of the reason why we draw that line between college quarterbacks and NFL quarterbacks, is we've grown accustomed to coaches having their kind of staunch, stodgy old ways and trying to force square pegs into round holes as far as the style of quarterback play. But we've found some new systems going forward where coaches are like, all right, you do this well, we're going to do this a lot. You don't like doing this, we're not going to do that. It sounds simple, but these guys are making it happen. And you can scheme guys open with misdirection and tricks. Like, you don't have to just try to run a go and find a matchup and win. Like, there are ways to set guys up to succeed. And I think that's going to be good for the quarterbacks, particularly throwing on top of it all the rule changes that we file in every year that improve the life of offensive players.
You hate that, don't you?
I mean, I don't hate it, but I think
you hate that, don't you? DBs hate it more than anybody else. You hate it, don't you?
I would not hate it as much if I think people took into account how much more valuable it should make the DBs and how much more credit the DBs should get. So it's just like, we change the rules and then we go out and start talking about how great all these receivers are, and no one appreciates how much more difficult it's gotten for DBs. That's the only thing that bothers me. I don't mind that it's hard. Just acknowledge that it's getting harder. And also acknowledge that with some checks, some extra commas and some zeros. Pay those guys, because they are doing the hardest job out there.
Yo, they do DBs wrong on that, because one thing I think about is like when the Tampa 2 was really in vogue, right? And teams started going to playing more zone defenses. What did they then say as they went to play more zone defenses? That the DBs weren't as important. Or at the very least that the corners weren't as important, because we can go find ourselves another zone corner and then nobody get paid.
That's the way that it works. Unfortunately, it's sad, but they keep doing it and it keeps working. I guess, Jalen Ramsey is part of the reason why Jalen Ramsey, that's one of the things that I bring up about why Jalen Ramsey talks so much. You talk a lot and you follow it up, you get eyes on you, it makes you more valuable, and more players should do it. And it makes it more entertaining for me.
Now, let me ask you this. You mentioned the thing about these coaches getting smart and scheming around their players. I was talking to my buddy Steve White about this, and there's an interesting thought I had here. This, like, in this phrasing, it is my thought, not Steve's. Don't blame him. Josh Allen might have been better off as an NFL quarterback if he were black.
Huh.
Would you like to know why?
I'm dying to know why.
Big dude, strong, and athletic, right? Right? Like, he can move. He can get around. How much better off would he be in a system that incorporated like that, the zone read stuff and all of that kind of put him on the move, as opposed to looking at him and just dropping him straight back and trying to have him throw the ball. And the thing he's not very good at is throwing the ball.
He's good at throwing the ball. He's not necessarily
far. He's good at throwing it far.
Yeah, he's not necessarily great at putting it where it's supposed to be. Not necessarily great at reading defenses. Those things tend to be pretty important at that position. He wouldn't have been drafted nearly as highly as he was. So
I don't know, man. All it takes is one, right? All it takes is one. Although Lamar Jackson's over there like, no, dog, they wouldn't have taken him as early. But I mean,
Jamarcus Russell kind of ruined that for the minds of, or ruined big, talented black quarterbacks in the minds of a lot of GMs, except he wasn't much of an athlete.
Right. Like Cam Newton got that pick at number 1. I always felt like that year, because if you looked at that draft, now granted it was, that draft is proven to be one of the greatest drafts of all time. But at the time, it was like, yo, there's nobody else you take in this draft that has the ceiling of Cam. Like, if you don't have a quarterback, you take this guy and then you figure the rest out. But I look at that, if Josh Allen were a black dude, they'd absolutely be having him out there running them black dude plays. Like, you remember when Teddy Bridgewater got to Minnesota and North Turner had him running the read option?
That is one of the funniest things. The things that I love the most about the NFL is when you watch those things happen. They just run out there and put black guys in black guy plays. It makes me so happy. And when I listen to commentators, I forgot who it was. It was somebody last year. I was watching a game and they just compared 2 black quarterbacks that were nothing alike. I think it was like Cam Newton and Jameis Winston. It's like, yeah, he plays a lot like Cam Newton and Jameis Winston. I was like, what?
Whoa.
Those guys, man, you are telling on yourself.
I'll tell you, man, we get Josh Allen out here running these black dude plays, everything can change for him. Like, Andy Reid, cause he was doing it with Alex Smith, so you don't think about it. Andy Reid was like, nah, man, I got a pocket full of these black dude plays.
Andy Smith's career is built on Andy Reid and black dude plays. I can't wait to see what he does with Mahomes, because Mahomes is black dude plays with that. I mean, Mahomes is essentially a more athletic Allen, I feel like, with strong arm. He's probably more accurate though. Yeah, I think Mahomes in under Andy Reid, another one of these smart coaches, I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yo, man.
What about white running back plays? Because McCaffrey, they need to run some of those black dude plays for McCaffrey. They need to run some of those Alvin Kamara plays for my man McCaffrey.
I mean, tell you that, like, there's some guys who would, right? Like, you give him to Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels went out here, have him out there running all the black dude plays. That's the thing I like about the Patriots. The Patriots are like, I don't see color, baby. You come out here, you can ball, we'll have you out here doing anything. Chris Hogan, damn right you going long, baby, because you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, that Chris Hogan is short white guy. The last thing that anyone is going to think is deep threat. But they looked at those numbers. They looked at his skills. It's like, hey, he can run these go routes. He's their deep threat. It's crazy.
By the way, let me give you a funny story here about the Patriots. They signed a couple of wide receivers, and I forget what the first receiver's name was, but the other receiver's name was Chad Hansen. And I was like, let me go to Google Images. He looked like you'd expect Chad Hansen to look.
Yep, just Googled him.
Yep. Like,
I thought you were throwing me a curveball, because I heard Chad Hansen. I was like, nah, Bomani's throwing me a curveball. This is not going to be a white Chad Hansen. Nope. Chad, he's got a Chad Hansen haircut too.
Dude, I saw it. People have gotten mad at me about joking about the Patriots and always getting these wide receivers, where I swear they get an email from the Lance Allworth Alliance just to let them know who's out here. Because it ain't just that they get wide receivers, man. I ain't never heard of these dudes until they get them.
Yeah, and they make them into something, and I particularly don't. I mean, that again, Jalen Ramsey was like, they really ain't that good. It's Tom Brady. I don't think that's completely fair, But they also export them. After they play well, they send them elsewhere and people sign them and give them big money as if it's not true. So whatever they're doing up there, they need to keep doing it. They're finding that market inefficiency.
Yes.
And then selling it. It's impressive.
That's totally it. Belichick is just like, look, man, there's all these good dudes that y'all aren't taking. We'll take them all. Every single one of them.
Doesn't he has the pedigree, the experience, the championships to take these risks? I feel like a lot of other places, they don't feel comfortable. They don't want to bring in, cause you can explain away if you have a big, tall, strong black receiver and he doesn't play well, you can come out and say, well, that's on him. If you get a little white receiver and he's a bum, they're gonna blame you.
Well, let's be real about this. Everybody loves it if you can get you a squad of white dudes in athletic competition to excel, and it's so great. But I watched this happen with Duke basketball in the middle of the last decade. Once that gets a little shaky, people don't even get slick about it. They're like, hey man, we need to go out and get us some athletes.
That's the code word. I know, we've been reading you've been having the book club, but I've been thinking a lot about that book club. By the way, the last, episode where you would talk with Howard Bryant was better than mine and it made me sad, but that's okay. Last Chance U. I just finished watching the last episode of the 3rd season of Last Chance U, and they're in a community college in Independence, Kansas. And it's the same thing where the coach came in, the whole team, the entire team is black and from LA, and Independence, Kansas looks like what you would think Independent Kansas looks like, and they are in heaven because they're good now all of a sudden because they went and got them some athletes.
Hopefully they're actually good, right? Hopefully they're actually good. Like, I wonder how often they get fooled. So, like, I went to a Division II college, and I'll never forget, we wound up with a dude on our squad. He was like 6'1", 240 playing fullback. And I remember I was like, he's terrible.
Yeah.
I assure you he's terrible.
Yeah. If you're 6'1", 240 and you got an athletic build and you're in D2.
Yep.
You're garbage.
You're terrible. Like, there was no way to put it. Like, Morris Brown at the same time got some dude who transferred from the University of Georgia, and I was like, oh, he must be hell on wheels. That's the only way you down here.
Not letting big black athletes leave Athens. Like, that just ain't happening.
and not getting all the way down to D2. Like you couldn't even get to Valdosta State or Georgia Southern. Like, none of them spots were like, no, we'll take you in. They're like, nah. Like, Isaiah Crowell, who's gotten to the league and by and large has worked out for him. But when he left Georgia, and I think he went to Alabama State, and I was like, yo, there was nobody in between those steps that wanted him. They must be afraid. Deathly afraid of what you're going to do when you show up on campus.
Oh my gosh.
No, man, this is like, I always find it funny because race, nobody wants to talk about race as it relates to football, and we ain't even necessarily got to talk about it in the deep, serious ways. There's all these funny ways like this that come up.
But as soon as you bring up even the funny ways, everyone gets a little uncomfortable.
Yes, they do.
Because I think for a lot of people, it's like, all right, I can laugh at this, but if I laugh at the wrong thing, or if then I follow up with a joke that crosses the line, people don't feel safe around it. I feel completely fine though.
Yeah, but that's also part of what was interesting about the Le'Veon Bell thing was that 2 of those 3 guys that we heard from are not white, right? 2 of those 3 guys we heard from are black guys, but the line, like the way that people think of the line is they think of that as being like the white dude position group.
Right.
Like, that's the way that they see it. And those guys all said the things that we expect, like, the white guy on Twitter to say about a dude who doesn't show up for his holdout. And It reminds you, football teams are segregated by position group, and position groups are largely segregated by race.
Yep. And then there are cultural, staples of each position group that seem to carry over. Like, if I'm standing outside of a stadium and I'm watching some random team walk in, I can pick all the cornerbacks out by how they are dressed.
Yes.
And how they are walking. It is easy. I can pick all the offensive linemen out by the same thing. And that stuff carries over to the way that you feel. I'd be stunned if any cornerbacks came out complaining about Le'Veon Bell, because that's just not a cornerback thing to do. Get your money.
That's a great point, right? Because, like, the receivers are probably not going to be out here complaining.
Nope.
The guys that are complaining with the Steelers on that, if we're being real about it, and I understand where they're coming from, is dudes who are never going to get paid the $14 million a year that Le'Veon Bell is being offered. So they're like, why don't you just shut up and come in here and get these $14 million a year?
Exactly. You know why you're not going to get paid that much? Because you're not that good. Whenever football players start talking about basketball money, it's like, I mean, you may be better at what you're doing than you are at what they're doing, but you're just not as valuable as a basketball player. There are less players on the court. There are less players, and they play both offense and defense. It's just not as valuable, unfortunately.
Well, also think about this one too. Didn't Ramon Foster talk about how Bell was making more money than him, and then he's like, yo, Al makes less money than him, but Alejandro Villanueva's got to be over here like, damn, dog, I'm just over here saluting the flag, and now you brought me into this.
No, because that is a good place to be brought in on this. Like, I feel like that's consistent with the Al brand.
Yes.
Like, I'm making the lease. I'm just out here grinding, saluting the flag, baby.
Al's like, y'all stay dragging me into this stuff. All kinds of issues I don't necessarily feel like talking about just because I went to war.
The one thing that is surprising about the offensive lineman speaking out is another kind of offensive lineman belief is that you don't talk about anything. So I'm shocked. Normally they don't talk bad about themselves. They don't talk bad about each other. They don't say anything good. They just don't say anything. And I know that's a difference that that could be partially a racial implication from having, like, while there is still an offensive lineman, culture, there's still something different about that locker room.
Now let's think about this also. The Steelers have not fired a coach in at least 50 years. Like, I don't know if they fired the guy before Chuck Noll, but everybody's gotten to walk on their own terms since then. Now, granted, it's only been 2 guys before Mike Tomlin, but you got to wonder at some point if this could be the end of the line for Mike Tomlin. If they come out here and go 8-8, then what?
Yeah, I mean, he's won a Super Bowl for them.
Yes.
So that I don't know what that grace period is. I don't know what a Super Bowl buys you, particularly in a place like Pittsburgh where they've won plenty of Super Bowls, and you got Terry Bradshaw, who's been a vocal antagonist to Mike Tomlin for quite some time. I think that Mike Tomlin is probably, I guess, the ownership there. He may not be on thin ice with the ownership. He may not be on a hot seat with the ownership, but it certainly feels like he's on a hot seat with the fan base because they can't get past the Patriots because they've been great all season long. They've been pretty good in the playoffs, but they can't get past the Patriots.
And it's been 10 years since that Super Bowl.
So is that it? Does a Super Bowl buys you a decade?
I don't know. Like, some people, like, we about to find out what a Super Bowl buys John Harbaugh.
That is true. He is also on the hot seat. But does it matter that he hasn't? Because John Harbaugh and Tomlin are very different. Like Mike Tomlin, they've been good this whole time.
Yes.
The Ravens have made the playoffs most of the time, but they've been pretty mediocre at best. Mike Tomlin, they were number 1 in the AFC. They've been good, consistently competitive team. And is it not unfair to judge guys, particularly in a sport where the playoffs are one and done, the best team doesn't always win? Isn't it kind of unfair to say, well, if you don't win a Super Bowl, you got to go? Like, they are in position to win a Super Bowl just about every year. Is that not enough?
No, you're right, totally. But have I ever told you my argument about firing coaches? That in any given year, I could make a case for firing 20 or 25 of the coaches in the NFL. Any given year, I can make a case. Even guys that we think of as being really good, I can make a case for firing them. Like, I can pull up the NFL standings right now, and I'm going to find one that seems like kind of crazy that you don't necessarily want to pull out there. But like Bill O'Brien, for example, all those years they won the division in Houston, I can make a case for firing him easy.
Oh, yeah.
Easy.
Absolutely.
I can make the case for firing him. Andy Reid, I can make a case for firing Andy Reid because people look at this as such a Super Bowl or bust sort of place. I got cases for firing everybody. So whenever the time comes and people decide they want to fire a coach, it always is so effective because it's so easy to make the point of firing them, no matter what it is. Well, we thought we should be better. The quarterback isn't developing fast enough. We haven't made the playoffs in 2 or 3 years. We can do it for anybody. I can make a case for firing Pete Carroll right now if I wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, I think the game is so complicated that it's nice and easy to go like, hey, we're not winning. We don't have a Super Bowl. Get rid of this guy. And you're right. We do measure it by Super Bowl championships. I don't think that's a smart way to measure it. And lastly, Mike Tomlin's middle name is Pettaway.
Really?
Yeah, I was shocked by it. I thought that needed to be shared. Michael Pettaway Tomlin.
Who knew?
It's brand new to me.
I also think, though, the turn for like not the full turn, but the partial turn from Tomlin came when he tripped that dude.
Oh yeah, that was horrendous.
That looks so bad, right? Like that was, Bradshaw always talks about him being like a cheerleader and doesn't carry himself as a coach and all these things, which I've always found to be, I don't know exactly like what to make of that stuff. Yeah. But, that was what did it because that really cemented in a lot of people's eyes that he was not a professional. in spite of the Super Bowl.
It's hard to argue. I guess you go with the argument that we are not as bad as our worst moments. That's the only argument you can make, because that is possibly one of the things you mentioned, Chuck Noll earlier, but this is possibly one of the single most unprofessional things that we've seen a coach do in modern football history.
Lane Kiffin wouldn't even do that.
Was it? It was Hayes, right? The guy who punched the player on the sideline.
Yeah, Woody
Ohio
Hayes,
State coach Woody Hayes. Yeah, that's the only thing that pops into my mind. You're right. Lane Kiffin wouldn't even do that.
Yeah, and Buddy Ryan punching Kevin Gilbride in 1993.
That wasn't in game, though.
Yes, it was.
Oh yeah,
yes,
that was on the sideline.
I will never forget this.
Right.
I'll never forget this. I was thinking about it today because one of my.
But it wasn't interfering with play.
No, it was not interfering with play. Okay. You're correct. But but also when Woody Hayes punched Charlie Bauman, the play was over.
Yeah.
But
it was on the sideline though. Like it felt like still part of part of the play.
I know a great woman. I knew her. She passed away. Her name was Dr. Jewel Prestige, and her grandson had posted something on Instagram today. So I was thinking about her. She's the first black woman in the United States to get a PhD in political science, and she got it at the age of 22. Right? Like, that's how cold Dr. Prestige was. I'll never forget. We were at the house because that was a Sunday night game, and Dr. Prestige called and said, Buddy Ryan just punched Kevin Gilbride in the face. Right? In her very erudite tone, we're like, what are you talking about? That does what do you mean he punched him in the face? He punched him in the face. This is after he spent the whole year ridiculing the offense, referred to it as the chuck and duck on his call-in show. People were calling Buddy Ryan and being like, well, what kind of offense would you run if you were the head coach? That was the craziest. I wish that season would have happened right now.
Oh, gosh, Buddy Ryan.
Craziest thing I had ever seen. That's also the year that the Oilers benched Warren Moon for Cody Carlson after they started 1-4, and then Carlson got hurt in the first half. They brought Warren Moon in, and they won all the rest of their games.
I admire and hate your encyclopedic knowledge. Like your brain is, you don't have to flaunt it on us that you can just pull out random Warren Moon stats out of nowhere.
Hey man, you have to understand, I was a black dude that grew up in Houston. So
Warren,
yes, these
Warren
things
Moon
mattered.
Was the man.
Warren Moon's sister went to Prairie View. Like I'll never forget one time I was at my mama's office and mama taught at Prairie View and we were I had a swimming lesson and my mama came to pick us up. She never did. We walked back. What's going on? She's like, hurry up, Warren Moon's back at the office. And so I remember we ran back across and we got Warren Moon's autograph.
That's impressive. Nice. You still got it?
I do have it. I still have it at the house. Warren's sister Kim. She was around PV for a minute as I recall.
That's pretty well. Since we're talking about Texas sports,
why you want to do that, Terp?
I just want to know. I want to welcome you to our club. You can be a part of the club.
I just want to know how it is. You don't never become no Maryland fan until they beat Texas. You're not the only person I know that be acting like that.
You're damn right. I believe that I've earned the right to jump on and off the bandwagon whenever choose.
Because you brought them their only conference championship since World War II.
That was it. Since I was about to say Boomer Esiason, but I don't think he won a conference championship. Yeah, so you're right. So I was a part of that team. We were good for a stretch, so I deserve to be able to laugh at them when they stink. And they get a win? Oh, those my boys. Oh, go Terps.
I was so embarrassed. We lost to a team with no coach. They just got no coach.
2 years in a row. I guess we had a coach last year, but we ain't have a quarterback.
Oh, well, you had a quarterback because they brought in that dude, he was the super freshman then, Hill. Yeah. They brought him in. And I was like, okay, well, at least this dude is good. And then he's coming out there wearing a binding knee brace, playing on a wet field. And the Cats still lost.
They're going to be all right, man. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's being a basketball school isn't that bad. It's okay. It'll be fun.
All right, we'll be back to talk about the Colin Kaepernick ad in just a second. But first, it's been a long off season without football. FanDuel has spent it getting into the best shape of their lives. We love that line. That means this. FanDuel's ready for more. More ways to play, more ways to challenge your friends, and most importantly, more ways to win. Now, this is important. Now, I know you might not be a daily fantasy expert. That's fine. FanDuel is definitely the best place for you to play if that's the case. They have all kinds of contests just for casual fans. In particular, Beat the Score contests are great because they pay out everyone who hits a certain score. So all you have to do is finish in the money and you split an equal share of the cash. FanDuel's also got new options for playing daily fantasy with your friends. Because there's one thing better than winning cash, and that's winning your friends' cash. Right now, you get a $20 bonus when you make your first deposit on FanDuel. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/Bomani. Age and state restrictions apply. Did you see the first Kaepernick ad?
I did.
What'd you think?
Can we lower the goals a little bit? Because Nike's like, don't be a football player, be the best one who ever lived. Don't just try to make the team, try to own the team. Like, can we just lower it a little bit? Nike, I feel like the goals at one point for Nike was like, be the best you can be. Just do it. But now they have changed it. And apparently, Colin Kaepernick is, don't just be an activist, be the best activist in the history of professional football. Like, is that the message they're trying to send? Because I found it interesting that they didn't play on that at all. Like the commercial's not at all about Colin Kaepernick or anything. I can't say that. It's not at all about what Colin Kaepernick's public persona is. Like Colin Kaepernick is rebellion. Colin Kaepernick is social justice. Colin Kaepernick is those things. This ad ain't nothing about this. This ad is about being great in the current constructs. Like, don't do nothing too weird. Just be really good at the normal stuff. And so I found it a little odd. I thought it was a fantastic commercial. Nike's good at making commercials that touch those buttons.
You know what I thought it was? A commercial. Like, dead up. Like, that was what I thought of it. And I don't know what expectations I had of that ad. And let's see what other ads they ultimately come with, right? But I thought it was just a commercial. And what they did was they had this ad campaign and they're like, yo, you know who would be really good in this ad campaign? Colin Kaepernick. And then they put Kaepernick into said ad campaign. Now, the question to me becomes, and this is, I guess, just a little awkwardness in this is, once you become the guy that Colin Kaepernick has become, are you allowed to just be a guy in a commercial? Because in theory, I don't see why you can't. It just becomes kind of disappointing to people who expected that commercial was going to be the start of the revolution.
Yeah. So I've been working through that in my own mind. So first, why is Colin Kaepernick good for this commercial? Like, it doesn't feel like I mentioned, like, the things that Colin Kaepernick brings, and I guess maybe just his presence is communicating what they are hoping to communicate, but nothing about that commercial wouldn't have been just as good if LeBron James was in there or if any other football player or basketball player was in there, because there's nothing about what he's saying that I think connects directly to the demonstrations or to civil rights. But I guess maybe just having him in there is a nod to that.
Right. I think that he is a guy that rates well with the people that they are trying to reach with the commercial, and therefore he is a good person to be in the commercial. But is it fair for us, and this is what I wonder if this is what we're doing, is it fair for us to limit Colin Kaepernick to strictly being revolution guy, right? So say Kaepernick was going through everything with the anthem he did and everything else, but was also an NFL player at the time and then came out and did something about be the best football player you could be. Would that be a problem necessarily? So like if it's like, let's say we take 1965 Jim Brown. Right? And yeah, Jim Brown was about black economic empowerment and everything else. But if we just put him in a commercial for chock full of nuts or whatever it is that a problem? And that's where, and I'm trying to sort that out within myself. Like I said, I'm also curious to see what else is coming down the pike.
Yeah. So I've been working through that particular, because I think that's the tough question. The rest of this stuff seems obvious to me, like the idea that the NFL doesn't want to sell Kaepernick, but other people do. Like you mentioned part of it, that they have different customers, but I also think that part of the NFL's customer base is sponsors. And those sponsors do not necessarily want to be close to those things. So I think that's easy. I understand all those different dynamics, but how to feel about Colin Kaepernick doing this, like my immediate reaction was like kind of like, no, I don't like it. But the more I thought about it, the more it's like, fine. Like we're all more than one thing. Why can he not make money? Like it's not the 1800s. You don't have to be Mahatma Gandhi, like to speak for something or to stand for something, and there's no reason why he can't make money on it. And there's an argument for this is raising the platform. They're giving more money. Like, I guess I don't see, other than it doesn't feel right. Like there's really no, to me at least, I haven't found a legitimate argument for why Colin Kaepernick can't profit, and also, why Nike can't necessarily use this as a marketing campaign.
Well, it's also worth noting, right? This revolution ain't going to pay for itself. And
that's for sure.
And my understanding from talking to people is that they're working on figuring out with the proceeds of the things that are going to come down the line, how that goes with his foundation and all of that stuff. Because I read something that was talking about how he was funding this stuff and couldn't afford to keep doing it. Like those Know Your Rights camps and stuff, he was putting a bankroll behind it, and he just could not keep doing it because he hasn't made that much money as an NFL player. Not enough to fund everything that he is talking about doing in this way. And again, this is a dude that kind of got thrown into this, right? Yep. Like, it's not like he knew.
He wasn't trying to.
Yeah, he didn't know what the hell he was doing when he got going with it. And I don't mean that as an insult. I think he's gotten himself up to speed pretty quickly. But these things take money in order to do. And there is like a certain cachet of cool that comes from being Kaepernick. And there is now like the black leather jackets and the afro and everything. Like, there's a look that's tied to all of these things. It has been branded, but like Jesse Jackson in the 60s was branded too. Martin Luther King was branded by his look. Like, all of these things to me kind of come together. And so, yeah, now he's doing commercials for Nike. And my expectations of Nike are very low on this front coming into it. So I'm not disappointed by anything that they wind up doing there. But you're right. What Kaepernick is talking about ain't about dreams. That commercial is about dreams. What he's talking about ain't about dreams. Like, even the I Have a Dream speech wasn't about dreams.
Nope. So my question for you, though, is it sounds like what you're presenting is like a defense for Kaepernick to some degree. Like, he needs this money to keep the campaign going. The question I have, and I fall on yes, it's okay, is what if he's just getting rich off of this?
Well, there's that.
Like, I mean, that aside, I feel like if you present it in the way that you just presented it, where he needs more money to pay for this revolution, then there is nobody who would feel weird about it. Like, hey, you get it where you can get it. The ends justify the means. I am okay with that, but I'm also okay with Colin Kaepernick just getting a check because he did the right thing, and he was one of the few people who was prideful enough and courageous enough to stand up to that, and he's getting paid for that. Like, are you comfortable with that also?
Well, that is a question that I've been dealing with for a while here, because one thing I think that happens that becomes unfair is that when people get in these places, we ask them to be monks.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we ask them, like, let's think about something small, for example. Like flying coach versus first class, right? You flying all around the country, getting things going or whatever it is. I feel like you deserve some leg room. Yeah. I feel like you do. Man, if somebody who was about your movement saw you sitting up there in first class drinking that free champagne, how they gonna look at you, right? Like, oh, so you got in this to fly into first class? No, but I would like to be in first class. And I don't think it's necessarily fair for us to ask people if they make stands on principle that from then on, everything they do in their lives have to be about that matter of principle. Like, nobody can live up to that standard. Like, it's kind of, like, you look on the internet, people talk about like canceling people, like the culture of canceling people. And, there's a lot of levels to it, but the one level is this: the more good you do, the harsher it becomes the moment that people think that they can cancel you, right? The more good you do, the greater the potential for disappointing somebody, because they're going to create this image of you as what they decide that you're supposed to be if you're this forward-facing person that's doing something for a cause. You ultimately will lose. Like, you cannot win. Like, the amazing thing about cats like King and Malcolm X is that they never slipped in that way and they never lost. But just about everybody else that we've seen get there, we've said that they lost or they slipped or they weren't in that right place for whatever it is, but hardly anybody can live up to that standard of principle all the time. And should one of the principles that you stand up for have to be being broke?
No, never. I don't ever think that should be a principle we have to stand up for. And I think the deification of a person and a player in this instance is also bad for the cause. Not only is it impossible for them to live up for it, like, I don't think Colin Kaepernick's not our Jesus. Like, he is not going to deliver us to salvation. Colin Kaepernick has brought attention to an issue. Colin Kaepernick is a human being who is flawed. If Colin Kaepernick comes out, if something is discovered that Colin Kaepernick secretly is doing something that is very detrimental to the cause, I'll be disappointed in Colin Kaepernick. But you know what? That doesn't invalidate anything that he said. And the sad part is, it does in so many people's mind. If they catch somebody, like you mentioned the first class example, they catch somebody in first class, they're like, oh, well, that invalidates everything you stand for. Like, no, the cause is separate from the individual. And I think there's there's something about this leadership culture that we are indoctrinated in, and this coach worship and all this other stuff is interconnected, where it's like, oh, we got to get the right president. He's going to fix everything. Like, no, it's not that simple. We got to get the right leader. He's going to fix everything. It's not quite that simple. And I don't know. I just think it's bad for the cause, and Colin Kaepernick should be able to get rich from it. And Colin Kaepernick should be able to make mistakes, say dumb things, do the wrong things. It shouldn't, although it will. It shouldn't impact how important we think the cause that he brought up is.
Now, here is, I do think, a fair counterpoint that one could make, which is that money compromises. Yeah. Right? Like, there's no way around it. Like, there are probably some things on different issues, don't presume you know what they are, but there are probably things on different issues that I would probably be willing to say in public, except for the fact that I like these checks that I get right now. Like, right. It changes the calculus. There's a reality, and it does raise questions once somebody puts a check in your hand, whether or not you're beholden to them or whatever it is that they're saying and that they're doing. And so, like, I understand a measure of skepticism that comes from that level, just because everybody's out here making some level of trade. That being said, it's hard to argue that the dude that walked away from an eight-figure annual salary is in this for the money.
Yeah, and he's certainly not. But if it turns out that he ends up making more, then I feel like that is some bit of cosmic justice. Like, that makes me happy. I'm happy for him. But you're right. But I think that goes back to my original point of, like, the problem of deification. Like, yes, money compromises. People are flawed. People are compromised. We're all biased no matter what we think in some way, shape, or form. So the idea that we can just hand it over to some dictator or some perfect leader and that he's going to fix it all or she's going to fix it all is, like, juvenile and foolish. Like, this ain't Marvel. Right. Captain America's not going to dive in and fix all this. Whoever comes to help us, and if we don't help ourselves, we are all flawed. And whoever else comes and we raise up on a pedestal as the guy that's going to fix everything, like, you're just stupid and childish.
Now, let's try this another way. How would people react if it was Eric Reed in the commercial? Because Eric Reed is he's kind of the Buzz Aldrin of this, right?
Yeah.
He's the second man on the moon. We don't think of him in the same way that we think of Neil Armstrong, but he's in the exact same boat. In the exact same boat and made less money.
And going, I mean, you could argue that at least on the kneeling thing, Kaepernick said that he wasn't going to kneel at one point if he went back on the roster. Eric Reed never said that.
No. Eric Reed did. I think Eric Reed is the underexplored great story here. Like, not only has no one, remember, there were all these stories of people looking into Kaepernick and why he wasn't getting signed. A lot of the stories were bogus and nonsensical. Right. Not one time have I read a story with somebody going to talk to NFL personnel officials about why it is that they don't think that Eric Reed is an NFL player, right? Like, which I think is an indictment of the media, because the media knows what's going on and won't say it. But no one's been able to come out here with that argument. But the thing is, Eric Reed is not, like, at the face of this. He wasn't the first guy who winds up doing it. Therefore, he is also, like, not a star. But if we found out that Eric Reed was doing this Nike commercial, I don't know if anybody's looking at Eric Reed and being like, yo, man, I thought you was about it.
They wouldn't, and they shouldn't. But you're right. He's paying the same price as Kaepernick, and I'd love to see someone make an argument for why the first round pick, safe, healthy, young safety is not good enough to make a roster. Like, it seems very obvious. But the problem with this case, with his case and Kaepernick's collusion cases is I don't think the owners aren't as smart as people think, but they can't be that dumb to have had some text messages or some emails like, nah, I don't want him. You don't want him? Like, they can't be that stupid.
You know what this is, though? I don't think they care if they get caught.
Yeah.
I think that from what we've seen here, because I haven't seen a single bit of evidence to indicate that any of this stuff is costing them any money, right? Like the protest or whatever it is. They've just decided that this is something that they don't want to do. This is something that they don't want to have. So they're going to ride it out. And if they need to send a message, you can send the message even if the lawsuit throws it out. Like, as John Thompson used to tell Patrick Ewing about goaltending, he's like, they don't remember the points, they remember the block.
That's for sure. So I had a similar conversation on our weekend show, which I would promote, but it's off now because football season started, so that would be a waste of breath. But we had a similar conversation, whereas I think the result of this case doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, it matters to Kaepernick, but I don't think it matters to the owners. I don't think it matters to anybody else in the league. Like, the message has been sent. Whether they call, like, that's a perfect analogy. Whether they call goaltending or not, it don't matter. No other players are going to go to the rim. Excuse me, exhausting this analogy, but the message is sent. The mission is accomplished. Players know that their careers are in jeopardy. And so if Kaepernick is found, if they do find collusion, so what? Nobody's going to do anything. Players aren't going to all of a sudden feel emboldened. They already know the message was sent.
Yeah, and I do want to see, though, how this continues to go if the NFL makes some other measure of misstep, right? Because they have found ways to anger players enough to do something, even if it's only for a little while, right? Because I think that we can look back on it now at the SOBs line for last year and the immediate reaction that came from the SOBs line. And if you don't like the people that you're talking about who behave like that, you would call the response a temper tantrum. If you didn't like them, right? Because they did it basically once, and then it was a wrap. Just to let that man know, we ain't nobody's SOBs, right? And that was actually the worst thing to ever happen, because then the notion of kneeling and everything else, it all got to be so convoluted. It didn't mean any one thing. It's just like, well, I got this thing I'm doing. Well, I've got this thing I'm talking about. And then everybody just went and they threw it out there, and now we just all wound up confused, where I'm like, maybe y'all need to like come up with doing something else. But I feel like they understood that if a bunch of them did it, like at the time they did, they might get something, they might get something from it. But what's not going to happen is apparently one dude being at the front and just being like, yo, what's going to happen? Like, what I want to see what happens is whenever Kenny Stills' contract is up, what happens with him? Because we haven't seen anybody get released for it, but we are seeing guys not get re-signed.
Yeah, I think that I guess my question, the reason why I think this case is somewhat irrelevant, like, because the people who feel a certain way. Like people who are pro Kaepernick are pro Kaepernick. And if and I'm guilty of this also, if they don't find collusion, that's not going to change my mind. Like, he still has been blackballed. If they do find collusion, I'm not going to get any more angry. Like, they are still being blackballed. And the people on the other side are like, he disrespected the flag. Whether if they find that the owners colluded, they're going to be like, hey, hooray, glad the owners worked together to stop this rebel. And if they don't find it, they're going to be like, so, well, good. They didn't. So I guess that's why I feel like this case is being covered a lot, but it's not going to have any real impact on the conversation or any of the people involved.
Yeah, no. And plus, again, I think we got a media covering this who don't care.
Yeah. Fact.
Like, I don't think the people in my business treat this with any level of gravity. I think, and even if they don't treat it with gravity, I think there's a certain fealty to the NFL and how they do things, where they're really looking at it, well, like, that's what the rich people want to do. Yeah. And then they're going from there. Like, have you read Howard's book, The Heritage?
No, I haven't. I heard you mention it. I ordered it, actually, when you mentioned it on the last podcast.
Yeah, no, check it when you get a chance. And there's a thing in there that I don't know how this hasn't gotten more press. He writes that Chris Long had to call the Eagles to get a job. He said no one called him after the season.
What?
Right. That's huge, right? Like, that is a giant big deal that speaks that even that dude who was just like, I'm rolling with my partners.
Yeah.
He had to call to get a job. Now, granted, he called and was still able to get it. But I think that is an amazing detail in here about like what the message is. Because let me tell you, ain't nobody boycotting the NFL behind Chris Long.
Nah.
Nobody's doing that, right? And that happened. Like, this is message sending 101, but nobody, like, I haven't seen anybody really do a deep investigative dig on, what owners and people think about what's going on with the Kaepernick situation. I haven't seen any of those things come up, and I'm blown away by the fact, like, you probably seen me talk about this on Twitter. There's an argument to be made. The Jacksonville Jaguars cost themselves a Super Bowl last year because they rolled out with Blaine Gabbert and did not sign Colin.
Yep.
Right? Like, they made a decision that they would rather ride out with a guy that everybody thought was terrible. You don't really see anybody exploring those things. And that's an actual real life football option, where if you don't think that Kaepernick is being blackballed, then at the very least, you got to have enough eyesight to think that Kaepernick's as good as Blake Bortles.
Oh, yeah. He's much better than Blake Bortles, and this goes all the way back to the first thing they were talking about. In the playoffs, they ran a lot of black quarterback plays for Blake Bortles. You know who might have ran them black quarterback plays a little better? The black quarterback.
Yes!
Like, Blake Bortles had more rushing yards than passing yards in their first playoff game. You know who might have had done a little bit better job? The black quarterback who took his team to the Super Bowl.
Running black quarterback plays.
They could have actually put a black quarterback. But I guess the defense of the Jaguars is that they just aren't very smart, because even after the offseason where there were other quarterbacks available, other black quarterbacks who are also very much better, including Teddy Bridgewater and Terod Taylor, like those guys were available. They didn't go after them either.
Yeah. I tell you this though, I don't think that's the defense of the Jaguars that people aren't using their defense out loud, but that's not their defense of the Jaguars. I will just tell you a line and I'm not saying I feel this way, just to be clear. I'm just giving people an understanding of what perceptions are out there. There's an old line about Florida that the north of Florida is the south of the South.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like that's the way a lot of people perceive Jacksonville. Like, Boston gets talked about more by people because it's just kind of famous for different reasons, and Jacksonville is just not a city of the same size. But there are a lot of people who feel about Jacksonville the way that people feel about Boston when they think about like things with regards to race. That being said, the Jaguars have had 2 black quarterbacks in their history. We cannot ignore. They had Byron Leftwich and they had David Garrard. So we're not going to say that, you know, this has never happened there. But I was talking to the dude who wrote this Sports Illustrated piece on Coughlin. I was going back and forth with him on Twitter, and he, you know, it was basically Tom Coughlin is military man Tom Coughlin, back straight all the time, and now he's created a team in the image of his straight back. And I was like, but it was a good story, just to be clear, but that's what it was based around. And I hit him and I said, that's cute. Until you consider the fact that being that guy may have prevented his team from winning a Super Bowl because he let his personal feelings get involved, get in the way of winning a Super Bowl. And
they not? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let's say, so I went back, so I had a decent discussion with him about it, and I want to read what he said. His name is Jacob Feldman, and he replied to me, he said, fair, though a sizable part of the community is probably happy with that trade-off. Jacksonville might have gotten the biggest local blowback to demonstrating. Management apologized to the military, then they partnered with this other company, and the video for this company is, let me see. Oh, there's a lot of American flags waving, in this commercial. And then he says, and I replied to him with that, and I said, I'd agree with you there, but that point deserves more scrutiny than it is received. Not that your piece was the place for that, but it's totally possible they messed up because they prioritized politics over football. And he says, totally agreed, though they'd call it patriotism.
That's a mess.
So I say that to say, that's why I think that people are absolving the Jaguars.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like a lot of conversations have been made about the Nike stuff and how they are a publicly traded company. So this has to at least have they are fiduciaries. So they have to have the best interests of their shareholders in mind. Like, is that not true of football executives? Because the best interest of them is to win a Super Bowl, you would assume. And It's pretty clear that a lot of teams did not have their team's best interest, but I guess that's what happens when you are not a publicly traded company, but instead you are a part of
bingo
monopoly.
I say a privately held company is a different animal. I'd also just like to bring this point up. We had a whole NFL season of Colin Kaepernick playing, and I ain't seen no one time that anybody said that the stands were empty at a game because Colin Kaepernick was playing. I ain't heard nothing once about how ratings were down for anything that Kaepernick showed up for. Like, every time people say, well, it'll be too much of an insert thing here if they bring him in. Michael Vick got out of jail, signed with the Eagles, and the league put his jersey on the website that moment. And Michael Vick went to jail for fighting dogs. And I'm not sure if it comes down to dogs or the flag, which is number one in the Q rating.
Dogs are pretty great. White people love dogs.
People love dogs, man. I did not know how much people love dogs, honestly, until then. Like, people really love dogs, and with their love of dogs and everything else, they got over it with Michael Vick. And so, like, to me, if you're going to say that fans can't get over it with Kaepernick, we need to really talk about why it is they can't get over it if you got over it with Michael Vick and dogs.
Yeah, because it's not the fans. And I think this is fair. I think the ownership didn't like it. And as many of us do, you find something that you don't like and it just rubs you the wrong way. You find a reason not to like it. You point to something weird and obscure and you're like, yeah, this is the reason. When actually, I think fundamentally they didn't like what he was doing. And instead of saying that, they're like, well, it's going to hurt our bottom line. When there is no evidence, as you mentioned, there's no proof that it's actually going to hurt their bottom line. And I think if they got behind it, people would get over it and people aren't going to stop watching football. Like I've been as close to football as anybody. I've seen all the warts of football and how ugly it can be. Guess what I'm be doing tonight when they kick off? I'm be watching football because people love football.
Well, you know what? Also, part of the irony is, at least as it relates to me personally, is Bomani Jones. I think that a lot of people believe that I think that all white people are like these monstrous races, right? There are a lot of people that believe that. I think you can probably see in your travels and people on the internet and stuff that there are a lot of people who feel that way.
Right.
I have consistently made the argument that white people are not as racist as NFL owners are treating them. That they are not as racist as the owners seem to believe they are if they're making the argument that this is going to hurt their business. Like, I am making the argument that in spite of a disagreement on this matter, that people are still capable of watching and enjoying football. I'm the one that's saying that, right? I don't get no credit for saying y'all ain't that racist. I don't get a drop of it, right? Like, I'm the one standing before you saying, no, I think y'all can handle that. And y'all the ones looking back at me talking about, don't tell me what I am. Right? Like, think about how crazy that is, but that is fundamentally like what is going down here. They are looking at y'all and saying, y'all are too racist for this. That's what their belief is. I am the one defending you. I'm the one that's got your back, baby. I don't get no credit for whatsoever, but I firmly believe that's the case. I just don't think this is about money or bottom line.
It's not. Yeah, I don't think it is either. That's a Trojan horse, so they can march these other beliefs right down and sneak them into behind the gates and use those to propagate that nonsense.
Well, it's kind of the way that when people start talking about the idea of a gay NFL player, they always pass off the intolerance to the players, right? They don't want to pass it off to the fans or the owners. They always want to pass off the intolerance to the players, which is crazy because, you know, I've never been an NFL player, but I feel confident, Dominique, that you probably back me up on this point. You probably played with some dudes that you didn't need anybody to tell you was gay.
Absolutely. I played with one of my college teammates came out afterwards. After college, and I'm pretty sure that there are a couple of guys in the NFL that I've played with, and that most of the team had speculated it, if nothing else. So, and it wasn't weird. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, like you didn't need somebody to tell you. Like, I have a family member who was gay, but no one ever told me that family member had come out, and somebody had brought it up in conversation. So I asked my dad, and I was like, "Hey, did such and such come out?" And he's like, well, I didn't really think he needed to come out. And I'm like, oh, no. I'm with you there. I just didn't know we could talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But I didn't need to be informed.
No, it depends on the family though, because,
yes.
Your family is very smart and educated people. My family, we got a few smart and educated people, and there are some people who have not come out who, while I think most people pretty much know, there are some people who are willfully ignorant, yes. I guess, older people in the family who do not want them to come out. It's fine. You can bring your friend Tom around all you want. Just keep calling him your friend and your roommate.
Right. Totally. There's something to it, but I'm just saying, sometimes you know it. You don't like you dudes have been naked in the shower with cats that you thought were gay. That has happened. But the ball is always passed off to somebody else when at some point you got to ask yourself the question, is the problem that the people that own the teams just don't want that?
Yeah. I think that's probably right. I think that those are the people who make most of the decisions. And it's ironic that when it's something like this, a hot button issue, the owners and the league office don't want to grab hold of it and just tell the players what it is and isn't going to be. But when there are other issues, like, as someone who's participated in negotiations, I'm quite familiar with the owners walking over and things where the players don't agree with and saying, you know what? We're going to have 18 games. No player has ever said they wanted that, but they have no problem getting behind that. Or you know what? We're going to split the money this way. The players want more all the time. They have no problem putting their foot down on those issues, which is why it leads me to believe that they don't actually feel that the fans or the players will be uncomfortable with some of these hot button issues as much as they're uncomfortable with it.
Right. That is that I always say with Kaepernick. There is one team though that he cannot play for, and that is the Dolphins. There is room for us to have discussions about the national anthem and about the flag You ain't really about to win no Castro argument in Miami, baby.
Absolutely not.
It ain't going down. It ain't going down. True story. This is a true story. You know, after Nelson Mandela got out of jail, Castro had him, you know, in Cuba. He was on stage with him and all that stuff. And, you know, the Cold War politics of Castro and sub-Saharan Africa and everything else, right? It's a bit complex. But anyway, Mandela, you know, stood with Castro. When Mandela died, I wanted to ask Dan a question about it. Dan was like, let's go outside for a second. We had to go outside to talk to Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela's welcome home tour did not have a stop in Miami. I say all that to say, Colin Kaepernick cannot be the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins.
No, that will not work.
And like all this stuff that I'm saying about the flag and everything else, I mean it. 31 teams. I'm just telling you, it ain't going down in Miami. That is the one place where you can't, no, because Colin ain't backing down on that one in the way that needs to be backed down in order to like survive on that.
I don't think there is any backing down. Like there aren't words that could be said. There aren't apologies that could be made.
Well, his point was, I didn't see it as a Castro shirt. I saw it as a Malcolm shirt. And they're like, all I saw on that shirt was Castro.
I mean, to be fair, that is not an adequate back down.
No,
like if you wanted a Malcolm shirt, there are plenty of Malcolm shirts.
Yeah,
you knew Castro was on the shirt.
Yeah. No, I don't think he ever thought it was going to be an issue that maybe he might need to get a job with the Miami Dolphins, right? Like I don't think that thing came up. But no, man, at some point we had to start asking ourselves just how much of this is the reason. Like rich people make decisions based on personal feelings all the time.
Oh yeah.
You know why? Because they're filthy thinking rich. Like on one hand, rich people are trying to get more money. On the other hand, rich people can afford to lose money.
Yep.
And often do.
I mean, to be fair, the rich people middle class and poor people make decisions all the time based on personal relationships or personal feelings. The fact that rich people do it they aren't anything other than human. They're the same, but I mean, I don't know who you collaborate with at work. I read an article the other day that's talking about how friends collaborate more at work and it may be bad for their productivity. Like that's an actual thing. People do things that are against their personal interests because it feels good. And I think that is the same thing. That explains why the NFL is doing what they're doing with Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, right. Domonique Foxworth, a couple things. One, check out Foxworth's column on playing in a contract year. I thought that piece, it's not even a column, piece in ESPN magazine. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. Just the insight of how that felt going into that year. Because I think we think about with contract years, we think about it as, now is your chance to get paid, as opposed to everything hangs in the balance right now.
Yep. It was a tough piece to write, and it was a pivotal point in my life, and I think there are emotional scars. Even though that things turned out well for me that season, there are emotional scars from that season that impact the way that I interact in life going forward. But I don't know. It's interesting to be from a guy like me who's not a star, because most of us consume football through stories or pieces about Odell Beckham and Jalen Ramsey. And Odell Beckham had a horrible playoff series or a horrible playoff game last year. You know what? Odell Beckham still got broke off because he is amazing. But I think the large majority of the league is not. And I think my piece speaks to that.
That was the 2008 season, right?
Yep.
Just be glad for you it wasn't in Atlanta for the 2007 season.
I thought it was going to be the same thing. I walked into that locker room and I was near tears because Vic was in jail. Petrino quit. We had a rookie quarterback I'd never heard of named Matt Ryan, and I was at the bottom of the depth chart. And I was like, all right, yeah, let me start looking at these postgraduate options, because I'm not qualified to do anything else other than be a bouncer as a former football player.
So check that out. Check it at ESPN.com, any of those places. You got anything you're reading right now?
I'm actually reading Red Rising. It's sci-fi. I'm on the second book of the series, but it doesn't really connect to sports stuff, but it's great. It's a great book. It's interesting.
They books, baby. They books. They ain't gonna hide nothing from you in no book. You reading them.
Chris Rock. Love him.
That is that whole routine is so crazy offensive. It could never exist right now.
It's offensive and it's genius.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing about comedy, right?
Yeah.
The job is to be funny. That's going to get you in trouble sometimes. Like that's going to be the thing. But that is Domonique Foxworth. Also check him out at theundefeated.com. And you realize I think we did a great job in this podcast. There's going to be some people that find a way to be mad at stuff we said, but we hit all the hot button topics without discussing anything in an offensive manner.
That's too bad. Next time.
No, man. I don't need these bots. I don't need these bots swarming on me. I'm kind of preparing myself for the Jacksonville revolt. And I just want to remind you, I ain't the one who's saying it. I ain't been around your little city long enough to have no conclusions. I'm just telling you what people say about y'all in these streets.
I've been to Jacksonville and it stinks. Literally. Boom. Stinks.
There's Domonique Foxworth.
Oh yeah. I'm here for it.
AKA Darnell Foxworthy.
Yeah.
I just want to
alias.
That's right. I just want to remind anybody that might find something to get mad at. I'm the one saying y'all ain't that racist. Bo Jones care if don't nobody else care.
I played in the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, walked around that landing. Whew. Pew-wee.
Yikes. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us here on The Right Time. We do this thing a couple times a week. My man Gabe Bassett handles everything behind the scenes. Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank our sponsor, FanDuel. We appreciate that. Remember, check us out on the ESPN app. Check us out on Apple Podcasts. Rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars. Just a hater. We'll be back with you next week on Tuesday. Take it easy.
Thanks for checking out The Right Time with Bomani Jones podcast.
You can listen or subscribe on the ESPN app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Right Time
with Bomani Jones.